Okay, today I want to respond to a question that was asked on one of my previous videos where I showed how to import images to use for reference here in Plasticity. But in that video, I was only using the images to help me get the correct proportions, not the exact size. So the question that was asked was how to import reference images and set them up at the correct scale. So in this video, I'll show how I typically go about doing that. But before I get started, I just want to mention that I'm using version 25.2.8, which I believe is the most recent version at the time of this recording. And over here in the grid menu, I have my units set to inch. And you can change that if you want, but this is what I typically use when I'm working on small projects. So the first thing I had to do was find a drawing with dimensions. So I did an image search and I found this one. So I opened it in Photoshop and I cut out the three views and saved them to their own separate files. But when you save your reference images, it's a good idea to make them all the same size. As you can see here in Photoshop, if I check the canvas size for each image, they're all 8 by 8. But your images don't have to be square, as long as they're the same size, whatever size that is. If it's 10 by 6 or 12 by 24 or whatever. As long as they're all the same size, it'll make life easier in Plasticity. And I'll show you why. In this folder, I have my images saved at different sizes. These two are sort of rectangular, and this one is kind of square. And if I drag and drop them into the program, you see that this image is really big and this one is really small. So I would have to scale each one of these images individually in order to get them all to be the correct size. And that's a lot of extra work. So I'll delete these and switch over to my square files. And when I drag and drop these, you see they're all the same size. So I'll be able to scale them all at the same time, which will be a lot easier and faster. So I'll hit the number 7 key on the number pad to switch to top view. Then I'll select all the images and hit M to open up the material dialog. And I'll set the opacity to 0.5. So now I can see the grid underneath the images. And then I'll right click to close the dialog. And now I need to scale these images to the correct size. And to do that, I'm going to use this 12.5 diameter dimension and this 4.5 dimension. And these are the only two measurements I'm going to need to scale these images. So what I'm going to do is create a corner rectangle, and I'll snap to the origin point to start the rectangle. And then if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, you see there are a few options here. So I'm going to hit C, and that will let me drag the rectangle out from the center equally in every direction. And while the rectangle is still active, I'll hit the Tab key, and now I can type in the X dimension that I want, which is 4.5. Then hit Tab again, and now I can type in the Y dimension, so I'll do 12.5, and then hit Enter to create the rectangle. And now you can see that the reference images are way too small. So I'm going to select all of them and then scale them up so they're a little closer to the correct size. And I'll move them so that this section view fits inside the rectangle. And I'm going to line up this edge of the image with the edge of the rectangle, about like that. And now I'll hit S to switch to the scale tool. Then I'll hit V, which will allow me to reposition my pivot point. So I'm going to snap it right here on the edge of the rectangle. And now I can grab the white circle here, or this purple square, and I can scale the images from this pivot point. And if it's not scaling smoothly, you can hold down the Shift key to get a little more fine control to get this other edge to line up with the rectangle. And that's looking pretty good, so now I can delete the rectangle and I'll move and rotate the images into position. And I think that's probably going to be pretty close. So now I'll create a cylinder, and I'm going to snap it to the origin to set the center point. Then I'll drag out for the diameter and drag up to set the thickness. Then over here in the pop-up dialog, I'll set the radius to 6.25 and the height to 4.5. And then I'll need to move it down minus 2.25 so it's centered at the origin. And then I'll rotate it 90 degrees. And now if I hit the number 3 key on the number pad, I can now move this image over until it lines up with the cylinder. Then I'm going to select these other 2 images, and I'll hit number 7 on the number pad. And now I'll move these over to about there so they line up. And then I'll hit number 1 on the number pad, and I'll move this one up so it aligns. And now I'll just run through the views again just to double check the positioning. So I'll hit number 3, and then number 7, and then number 1. And I think that's looking pretty good. So now your reference images are set up and you can start modeling at the correct scale. But before you do, select all your images and then hit Ctrl-G to put them in a group. And then you can double click on the folder and rename it to reference and then lock it. So now you won't be able to accidentally select an image and move it or scale it or anything like that. And that's about it for this one. I'm going to go ahead and create this model, and then in my next video I'll show how to export it and then import it into Blender at the correct scale. But if you have any questions or comments about reference images, go ahead and post them below. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.